Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where I have the distinct opportunity to highlight the voices, the experiences of people who know what life is really like beyond the word abortion that we hear thrown about in our culture. Today's guest is a friend of mine, someone who I enjoy immensely, someone who I respect and admire, and I think you, the audience, you are going to be inspired and I think in many ways challenged by what she has to share today. Let me introduce you to my friend, Denisha Workizer, the founder of Reclaim Story. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, Melissa, thank you so much for having me and also for all that you do for all of us as survivors and everything in the pro-life movement.
Yeah, you and I have, we've been through the trenches together a little bit, forming nonprofits, working together to, heal and equip abortion survivors and, lived life at the same time, which life is often messy and imperfect. And there is pain and there is beauty to be found in that. And I think that's one of those things that I've always admired about you, but I want to just unpack it with you today because I think you're a great example, not only of somebody who is resilient and someone who is obedient to God and sees the fruit of that, but you are also someone who, you learned your story later in life about how you had been impacted by abortion. And I think that does challenge people a little bit and maybe can put people in your shoes to know what it's like. So let's just start there. What's your life beyond abortion story, or where did that part of your story begin?
Well, a couple months before sending you a very messy email, I was 42 years old and the New York law had just passed, the Reproductive Health Act, and it allowed abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. And when that passed, I was really upset about that. I had had no prior work in the pro-life movement besides supporting our local pregnancy center. And when that law passed, I was very, very upset. And the thought kept coming into my mind, ask your dad if your mom ever considered having an abortion with you. And that's a weird thought, right? One that I sort of negated the first time. The second time, I was talking to my husband and I said, I wonder if mom ever considered having an abortion with me, right? A lot of times we see things on the news and we internalize it a little bit. What if that happened in my city, or what if that happened in my state? And my husband's response at the time was, honey, I'm sure she considered it. She had an 18-year-old daughter at home. She was in trouble with the law at the time. She was not married, and I'm sure she considered it, but she didn't. And I thought, oh, that's true. She didn't though, right? And so I really felt prompted to text my biological dad. My mom passed away in 2001, so I couldn't reach out to my mom and say, did you ever consider this? So I texted my dad, and what came back about 3 hours later was so shocking to me. To be honest, I think it sent me into a total identity crisis at the age of 42.
Yeah. And so at the age of 42, you ask your dad this seemingly harmless question. Did mom ever consider having an abortion with me? And the response was?
Did you ever wonder why we called you a miracle baby? And I have this distinct memory of my mom giving me a big hug at my high school graduation and saying, "Oh, my miracle baby graduated high school." And that was something I'd heard all throughout my life, that I was their miracle baby. Now, my mom and dad were only married for a few months after my birth, and then they did get a divorce. So I remember just miracle baby, right? So my dad proceeds to tell me the reason that they called me their miracle baby. And that was because in October of 1975, my mom found out she was pregnant. And I kind of told you based on what my husband said, right? She was in trouble with the law. She was facing jail time. She had an 18-year-old daughter at home, not married, right? Like all, not the greatest environment, right, to consider bringing a child into. So she finds out she was pregnant. And the next month in November, she took the abortion pills. Now, the abortion pills were not legal and not from the FDA until 2000, right? But this was 1975. And my mom knew of a doctor that served ladies of the night. And when they found themselves pregnant, he would provide these pills. And so my mom took those pills in November of 1975. And in December, she'd been bleeding for a month. And in December, she found out that she was still pregnant. So my mom proceeded to have a DNC abortion at that time. And so my dad, when he tells me this, I'm like, wait, what? I mean, it doesn't feel real when someone tells you that at 42 years old. Um, Fast forward December, she has the DNC procedure, and February, she finds out she is still pregnant. And it was in the state of California. So back then, right, 4 to 5 months of pregnancy, she was not allowed to try another abortion attempt. However, they ended up getting married in April. I was born full term in July, and their marriage only lasted for a few months after that. But I am very thankful that both of those procedures did not work, and very shocking to find out later in life that that was your miracle baby story.
And it gives me chills when I hear you talk about their loving term for you, because I hear that all the time in our survivor population. So many survivors whose families call them the miracle baby, and they're just kind of like, great. I mean, yay. I wonder what that story is about, and yet we don't really ask a question, or somebody then later offers it up, and you just kind of go, whoa, like, no, I had no idea that that was a miracle story. But it's a beautiful miracle story, and one that we shouldn't have to apologize for in our culture, right? Miracles happen, and we should be able to share that God story and not be made to feel guilty about it. Like, that's my soapbox. I'm tapping on it.
You keep tapping on that. It's so true, right? We shouldn't feel guilty about that. And yet when we hear in the news about abortion, it feels so personal after you discover that this is part of your story.
And so when you say you sent me this long, messy email, I mean, again, this is the work that you and I both do in our own spheres with people. To me, I'm never like, I don't look at an email and go, oh my gosh, what a mess. I'm always like taken aback by the miracle of people's lives. But I know when you are like verbally vomiting, people are always like, oh man, I can't believe I just sent that email out into the atmosphere. Or people will go, you're never going to believe my story. And I'm like, well, you have come to the right place, because nothing surprises me. But that takes a lot of courage to share your story, even privately, with people that you don't know. And I mean, that's part of sort of what you do in your sphere too at Reclaim Story, is what it's like to be a vulnerable person with a vulnerable story.
Absolutely. And now I'm on the receiving end of emails like that, but not particularly abortion survivor stories. But I remember I spent a couple months really angry, to be honest. I was angry at God, if I'm really honest. And I was a pastor at the time. And I was angry with the Lord. I was angry with my mom. And of course, I had no way to ask the questions. So there were a lot of unanswered questions in my heart there. But it took me a few months. And I remember feeling like my keyboard was calling me, like, go type it in. And I remember I thought I was the only one. And we've heard that over and over with other survivors, right? I thought I was the only one. And you have this feeling of almost shame, or definitely shame. And my whole life, I think I had struggled a little bit with a lot with rejection and abandonment. And I didn't understand where that came from, or not feeling like I belonged. So, of course, I was the only one that this, thing happened to. And so I remember my keyboard almost like calling me. And I went to my computer and I typed in, "Do babies survive abortions?" And up popped you. And so I sent you that really messy email that probably made no sense, but it was like, "Oh my goodness, I just found this out. I don't know what to do with this. Am I the only one? Are you and I the only ones?" Because then I was like convinced it was you and I now, like just the two of us. Well, now we know there's thousands and tens of thousands of survivors all over the world. And that was definitely finding and belonging in a group that shared a club that we don't want to be in, right? That shares the story. That was really super healing for me in my process. So now I'm on the receiving end of a lot of those emails for different reasons and past trauma, but it's a gift to be able to serve just in these ways in people's hardest moments. That was definitely one of my hardest moments that you stepped into.
Well, and you're a great example of what happens when someone discovers they're not alone and then feels like they're called and they're equipped to step forward with their story. And right, as you and I both know, like most survivors probably don't know their story. And then those that do are likely not going to share their story for lots of different reasons, whether it's familial, cultural, their employment, healing, whatever it is. But sometimes people share their stories and it makes an impact in the world. And that is part of that continual transformation of finding and using your voice. And I would love to talk about that a little bit because you obviously you are a gifted communicator. That's part of your background. You were a pastor. But this space was not one that you were like, "Hey, I would love to share my abortion story and, essentially become part of the lightning rod." So let's talk about that. I mean, you are intentional in every area of your life. I know that about you. You are a great planner, right? You're intentional. And so you did not enter into sharing your story publicly in a light way.
No, as a matter of fact, I remember you telling me, we'll equip you if you decide to share your story. And I remember thinking, no, I'm not going to share this story. Share that my mom didn't want me, that there were two attempts on my life before I took my first breath. That was not a story that I wanted to go and, run with a banner down the street with, right? And I remember the day that that changed. And it was probably 6 months after finding out my story. I was working with you. You'd kind of taken me in under your wing a little bit. I'd met some other survivors by Zoom at the time. And I got this phone call, and it was a normal Tuesday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I answered the phone, "Hello." Now, I did not know a lot about abortion, okay? I knew my story, and I'd met some other survivors, and I was beginning to heal. I was beginning to find belonging in an incredible group of people, and I wanted to serve them, but I didn't have the feeling in that moment to run with a banner down the street. And I remember when I said hello, her response was, "I understand you know a lot about abortion." And I thought, what? And I just kind of stopped and I said, "Oh," I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about where you are." And she said, "Well, our friend, a mutual friend, gave me your number and said you knew a lot about abortion." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, yeah, tell me, where do you find yourself in life?" And then she said, "I'm 7 weeks pregnant. I'm trying to decide between taking the abortion pills or having a surgical procedure." And in that moment, my heart starts racing and I can just feel the hand of God over this conversation. And I mean, that's exactly what I survived, both of those procedures. And so I kind of wanted to rush in and be like, "Don't do it, let me tell you." But I felt like the Lord was saying, "Wait, kind of tuck it in your back pocket." And he's done this with me on plane rides at one time at a bar that I went to for dinner. And I've had these crazy conversations, but I really feel like the Lord's given me an ability to connect heart to heart with people. And so she said, she told me her story, and she said, well, my mom says that it's just a blob of tissue and that it's not really a baby, and that as long as I do it soon, it's not a big deal, and we can just take care of the problem. And so I sat and I listened, and I said, I said, your mom, I understand why you're, instead of saying your mom's wrong, here's the truth about 7 weeks of pregnancy. I said, I understand why your mom said that. This compassion just came over me to say, that's what your mom's been told, right? By the media, by all these different things. But can I tell you that actually your baby has a different DNA code than you? Your baby can feel pain. Your baby has its own heartbeat right now. And she goes, I've never heard anybody tell me that before. And that's what I feel like with my mom as well, right? Like it was a lack of information and an understanding of the wrong information. And so when I said that and explained that, and then I said, hey, do you mind? Now, she doesn't know me at all. I said, do you mind? I said, could I come pick you up and take you somewhere? And I picked her up and I took her to our local pregnancy center. And she got to see her baby on the ultrasound. And a couple of days later, she called me back and she said, Denisha, she says, you're like my baby. And those words hit me so much, like, wow. And she said, I'm going to keep my baby. And in that moment, I was like, you have those moments sometimes in worship where you throw out your arms and go, God, I will go to Africa for you. Like, I will do anything. This was one of those moments for me. I was like, Lord, use my story, take it wherever you want it. I will go where you send me. I mean, to see a woman choose life because of my story of shame and rejection it gave purpose to my pain in a way that I thought, Lord, I will do this forever. And so your encouragement, that experience, and that shifted my whole mindset. Then I was like, give me the banner, like we're going to go. Uh, then I'm all in, at that point.
And I think that's one of the things. I mean, people have so many preconceived notions about abortion survivors, from right what we've survived to how many attempts a baby can survive, what our lives look like, whether we're somehow raised to become these like spheres of we're the tip of the spear and the pro-life movement, all those things. But I think that one of the preconceived notions is that people just can't even begin to imagine the amount of pain we experience. And a lot of it, we don't even understand it for a long time because our families don't talk about it. And so we wrestle with this, like you communicated, this feeling of isolation, not belonging, that there's something very different about you. And then you start to figure out your story, or you're told, and you're going, no, but now I know why I'm set apart, not in a good way, right? And all those things. And I think then people don't understand the amount of purpose and healing that comes in just giving voice and connecting with other people. I can't think of any other issue, Denisha, where, someone has been hurt and they find a way to give back, right? They find a way to connect with people who are similar to them, or someone in their family who was hurt. I can't think of any other issue where people would go, no, 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 no. Don't use your pain for purpose. How dare you? But yet I think there is that standard for abortion survivors, or women who regret their abortions, or men who are impacted, that somehow we're supposed to just like stuff it inside apparently and be quiet and not use it for good.
Well, and I think after I experienced such healing and belonging with the Abortion Survivors Network, my heart really goes out to my mom. I mean, my mom passed away when I was 23. And after talking to different family members, they've told me that she had a lot of shame over that. She raised me. I was raised by my biological mom. And that she had a lot of shame and a lot of pain over that, but that was never something that was going to come out. And so many different members of my family, as they've heard my story publicly, they've said, this makes so much sense to some things that we saw in your childhood.
Yeah, and my
And
half
so,
sisters were
yeah.
the same way. My half sisters will say, we always knew there was something wrong with mom that we didn't talk about, that nobody knew about except for a handful of people. And when the secret about that failed abortion finally came out, they went, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And you're right. It is behind every abortion survivor is the woman whose abortion didn't go the way she planned it to, and typically a father who is somehow, right, at some level connected to that, and extended family members who are impacted by it. And even though there can be positive outcomes in a family, you and I have both heard enough stories of survivors to know that so many families have been unsupported even after abortions fail. And there is guilt and shame and then interesting family dynamics and child mother dynamics, usually born from the abortion attempt, and then mom not being supported. And that can be manifested in many different ways, whether it's, a cold detachment or a high level of enmeshment. There can be abuse and neglect, right? You name it, it happens. And I just wonder what would happen in our world if women like your mom, and my birth mom would have been given the support and the space to say, you are not the only woman that this has happened to. You don't have to blast your story to the world, but you aren't the only person. And we're going to support your family in the long term. Would things have been different for you guys, do you think, Denisha?
I think absolutely. I think when we have family secrets that go into the dark, it manifests, right? What we don't heal, we carry on. And so I think a lot of that shame I picked up, a lot of that regret I picked up, the feeling of not belonging in something, or I'm not supposed to be here. That was a feeling that I had a lot growing up, and it made no sense to me until I talked to other survivors. So I think if we don't bring it into the light and heal it for ourselves, we pass it on to other generations. And we see that time and time again with all sorts of different traumas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a friend recently in a text message, and, it was like a joking, sort of funny thread, but they said, just wanted to let you know you're wanted. And I looked at that and I was like, I wonder if that was intentional. I mean, they know me to know my story, but I was like, I don't know if I even am I being weird? But then later, as we're all having dinner and kind of dissecting it, I was like, what did that mean? They were like, we know you. And we wanted you to know that you always have a seat at the table. You're always wanted. And that is something that all of us in some way, shape, or form still deal with, no matter what age you find out your story.
Absolutely. And I think I always was an overachiever at work. Back when I spent 20 years in the jewelry industry in the last year and last 15 years in ministry, and I've always been an overachiever. And I do think after going through, you have an incredible healing curriculum. And after going through that, I think I realized that a lot of my perfectionism and a lot of my achievement seeking, I didn't really seek the pats on the back from other people. I more sought the success, the accomplishment of the challenge, like that I got to be a part of that. That is what motivates me, is to see something through. And so I think in that, I think I've always overperformed and had perfectionism because I think I was fighting for just what you said, that seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I often say to people, I'm that person who wants to be invited. I don't probably want to go, but I want to be invited. And it's that, yeah, right. It is that personality. I'm not trying to prove myself to the world. I'm trying to prove to myself
Yeah,
that
that's true.
I'm, yeah, I'm valuable. So that's one of those things that other people can relate to, right? If people are listening to us and they're going, well, I don't know what it's like to survive an abortion, but I do know what it's like to feel like, right, I have to keep going. I have to achieve. I have to keep doing. Let's talk about that, because that's kind of your wheelhouse. Like, what would you say to someone right now who is in the thick of it, and maybe they know that they're operating in a way based on their own past trauma?
Mm. One, I would say counseling, 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 finding a good, reputable counselor by you, because there's so many things from our past that play out in our present, so many patterns that we find ourselves in. But as far as proving yourself, I would say God didn't create us to be human doings. He created us to be human beings. And that's something I'm still learning. Now I'm 49 and I'm still learning that exact lesson. So I would say if you find yourself in the doing, it is definitely valuable to sit down and unpack the why. What drives you? I remember a one of our executive pastor pulled me in his office one day, and he said, "Denisha," he goes, "we love what you do. We see you're here till late every night. You're doing great things in the ministry." And he said, "But what we can't figure out is what drives you." And this was before finding out my survivor story. This was before, unpacking a lot of personal healing on my own and with a counselor. And I remember thinking, I want to run out of the room. Like my light kicked in and I was like, I don't know, I feel naked. I got to go right now. Like I was what drives me, but it lingered with me and lingered with me. And now it's been, probably 9, 10 years since he asked that question, but I'm really starting to unpack. So I would say to someone who finds himself in that doing mode is that one, God designed us to be human beings in relationship and connection. And if we're doing so much, we don't always connect with other people. And that's really where the gift, I think, of this life is within others. And I would ask the question, what drives you? And unpack that a little bit, because I think there's some really good meat in that.
Yeah, what drives you? And to be honest with ourselves about it, right? We can answer that question and be like, oh, I know. No, but are you willing to be vulnerable with yourself to say, oh, right, there might be more to why I am the way that I am? It's a very vulnerable place to be. Because it becomes a bit, not only is it sort of this entrenched behavior, right, that becomes a pattern that we engage in, that becomes our identity, but it's also, it really is, it is so deeply intertwined with our physical, mental, emotional health and stability. And, you and I both know what it's like when essentially people want to change, but they want to remain the same. And I think that's one of the scariest concepts, no matter what it is that you're working through, is you want to be the best version of yourself possible, but you also want to have some sense of control and stability.
Absolutely. And I think that when there's trauma or when there's intricate parts of our story that are unhealed, or even sometimes healed, right? Healing's a journey. I think we don't ever really arrive. I think it is something that we walk through our whole life. But I think we have this thing that we do in order to control and not be vulnerable, that we tell people stay away, but then we go, come closer. Come closer. I think I need you. Stay away. And I know that we see that at Reclaim Story, but I also know that you see that with survivors, right? They come, they touch, they want to unpack this, they want to heal, they want to be part of community, but they touch and they leave, and they touch and they leave. And I know some of the survivors, 7, 8, 9 years that they came and touched and then left and then came back. So I think you're right. I think we're wired to heal and to be whole and to be integrated with our stories. And it's hard to do. We do that, go away, come closer, often during that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard, I think, for people then to be in relationship with one another sometimes when we're in the midst of it, whether it's family members or, a spouse. There tends to be that kind of interrelationship dynamic that kind of ebbs and flows. And, I'd be curious what you have to say about that. Let's talk about what you do at Reclaim Story so people can understand, how you know what you know.
A lot of classes, a lot of certificates that I've been through, but what we help women do, we all have things that over the years we shove under the rug, right? The experiences in life we don't really have the tools to deal with in our teens and our early ages, even in our 20s and 30s. So we shove them under the rug of our life. And eventually, what women find themselves doing, and there's a lot of studies on this as well, is in our late 30s, early 40s, sometimes later, sometimes earlier, but averaging late 30s, early 40s, we begin to trip over that rug. And there's something in us that wants to reconcile what our story means for our life today. And so we begin to peek under that rug, and that's where we meet women. We help them heal from the pain of their past, no matter what that involves, so that their stories aren't their weakness, aren't their shame, isn't something that they have to hide, but so that their story becomes their strength. And we serve women all over the nation, and it is one of the great joys of my life is helping women and seeing that transformation, just like we see with abortion survivors, right? As they go through healing and they meet other people, and our women may not have the exact same story, right? They may have different types of harm that have happened in their story. However, when they come together and we take the particularities off, what lies in the bottom can be guilt, can be shame, can be all of these emotions that each of us can understand. Just as you said, not everybody watching may be an abortion survivor, but we can relate to not feeling valuable or not being enough or not belonging. And so that's where our women really have a united front. And we see that with survivors as well. So that's one of the things that we love. We just launched an app actually to make it even more accessible for women all across the world. It's the Reclaimed Story app. It's free, and there's community resources, articles. We're going to start a healing hub soon with resources all across the country in one place. So that is one of my passions, is just seeing the transformation in the lives of women.
And it's faith-based.
Yes, it's faith-based, absolutely.
And I want to briefly touch on that, because I think you have some wisdom that you could drop in this podcast that I don't want to forget. And that is that there's a need within churches, within the lives of Christian women for this to be addressed. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, such a great point. There is, right? As I was a pastor for 10 years at my church, and what I began to see was women come into my office with these terrible things going on in their lives. I mean, just hard things. And then I would see them on Sunday morning, almost with a mask on, coming around, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. And I remember one day there was a particular family that came in, and I had walked through a very hard situation that was kind of a matter of life or death during the week. And that Sunday, here comes the family with their children walking on campus. Everybody's high-fiving them. Hey, how are you? How you doing? They're like, oh, we're good. And I remember something in me in that moment just broke. And I went back to my office, and I was sobbing, like ugly crying. And, sometimes as trauma survivors, we do not like to cry. We like to be tough, right? And I just broke. And my pastor came by, and he said, Denisha, what did you expect them to do? Did you expect them to come, with their clothes torn and ashes? And what did you expect? And I said, I don't know, but I didn't expect them to be fake. And then it hit me, and I thought, where do those people go? Churches have I love the body of Christ. I love the capital C church. And we do amazing things inside the capital C church. But what I wasn't seeing is that we had a place for women to come in, not women's ministry, where we come and we learn about the Bible together. There's such a place for that. But where do we come and take off the mask and say, I have an addiction to porn? My husband is cheating on me. I'm having an affair. I'm privately drinking in my closet and nobody in my family knows it. Or I've been abused, or I've had an abortion and never told anyone. How are we helping those people and creating a hospital setting where they can come take their masks off? And that's what we've done with Reclaim Story. That's one reason our life groups are online, right? So that you're not sitting with somebody that you've been in Bible study with for 20 years, because you may not divulge. You may not know how to take off that mask. So I think I just saw a gap in the church of something that I don't think can be provided there, that's typically outsourced to counseling. But I think that we found over the last almost 7 years now, we've been a ministry, that there's a place for this. There's a place for women to come together and biblically find the truths, not throw those well-intended Bible verses, oh, you're going through a hard time. Well, the joy of the Lord is your strength. Is that true? Yes. Is it helpful in that moment? No, right? Like I don't feel the joy and I don't feel strong, so God must not love me. And that's a theme that we see over and over with women is the church has rejected me. No, the church just doesn't talk about the particular problem you're carrying. Or I don't have a place, I don't fit. And it's because they're carrying this. So when they can take that off and then they go back into their churches and their Bible studies, they are a conduit for truth and for real relationship building. And so it's been a joy to build that. But there's a gap there, and we decided to jump in and fill it. And it has been messy, and it has been beautiful all at the same time.
Yeah, just like life. And you did a great job of articulating this is right. This is a blessing for churches, right? You aren't saying, "Hey, church, you aren't doing your job." You're simply saying, "Hey, church, I know that you are doing all the things that you are called to do, and I, as someone else who can fill a gap, I'm here to serve your congregation in the way that I can." And then, right, as they get healed and they have community that empowers them, they're coming back into your church and they're at a better level of functioning, right? Which is what every church is looking for them to be deeper in their faith, right? Like multiplying the effects of church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we see people go back, and as they have found healing, they're now a place of safety and refuge for other women that maybe haven't found us, but they get to go out and they are that refuge place now for other women. And it's that matter of sitting knee to knee just with one woman, with one, man in men's ministry, or just sitting with that one person and hearing their story and being compassionate and empathetic in those moments, not trying to fix it, not trying to avoid them in the hallway because they're going through a hot mess at home, but really engaging with that person. So yeah, it's a beautiful process, and we just pray it blesses churches as people come back out, and that we are a blessing to the church.
Well, and you are, right, you're being the example of Jesus, right? Sitting knee to knee with someone. And we know that. We know that in the church. We believe it, but sometimes it's really hard for churches to put into practice just with all of the expectations of what they're already doing.
And I can tell you from being a pastor, as I said, for a decade, the expectations, everybody has different desires for you in the church, right? There's a lot of pressure on our pastors. Pray for your pastors. They're doing so much for the body as a whole. But the church they have a place, and they can't do everything, right? That's why there's so many amazing paraministries to step into those gaps. So that's what I feel like we've done.
And you've done it beautifully. Like I said, you are very intentional and yet visionary, and it's just been fun to see your organization continue to grow and to meet the needs of women. You do a phenomenal job. If people want to know more about Reclaim Story, what's the best way for them to find you?
They can go to our website at reclaimedstory.com, or if it's a woman, you can download our app. It's Reclaimed Story in the App Store for Apple, Google, anywhere you get your apps.
So this is new to me, I'm going to be really honest. So if they download your app, that's something that then they get like credentials, they get approved, or like there's just
Yes.
various pieces they can access?
Yes, so they come into our app. We do have rooms that are kind of locked just for certain participants. If they're in a life group, they're in a room that's locked in private. But all in all, it's for women of all denominations. We're a multi-denominational ministry to come and find refuge, find healing resources. What do we do with our anxiety? What do we do with our past? What does the Bible say? And so that's where we can meet women in that community on the app.
Perfect. And I love that because I want people listening to know that's safe. You can go to the app, right? Folks who are in the app are kept safe in the way that you have set it up. And, folks who are joining the app, then, they'll be kept safe as well. So that's wonderful.
We are a troll-free environment.
Well, that's a whole other podcast. We're going to have to talk about how that happens. If there's somebody listening right now, Denisha, who, maybe is in your mom's shoes.
I would say that we see you, that you're not alone. And there are pregnancy resource centers probably right around the corner from where you live. And there are other options. Abortion is not the only option. There are so many different choices, and you're not alone in that. There's so much support through our pregnancy resource centers all over the country. And they're waiting and ready to step in and help you past the birth of your baby, not just for the decision for life, but all of the decisions that you're sitting and worrying about. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Maybe you have a partner, maybe you don't. The pregnancy resource centers close to you, those places will help you even after your child is born, so you don't have to do this alone.
And because, we also know many survivors are watching, listening, all the things we say and do. I'm just wondering if you would have a message for abortion survivors.
If you have not already, if you are sitting and your keyboard is calling you, I would say go to abortionsurvivors.org. Melissa, the organization that you've put together it's so safe, and there's so much of a community who understands exactly what you're going through. And Melissa does equip and help us to share our stories if we choose to share our stories. I've chosen to share my story. So far have done 47 talks in 21 different states by the end of this year. And that's something I felt called to do. But if you just want to connect with someone and you're like, I don't ever want to share my story, are they going to make me do that? Absolutely not. We will provide, Melissa's organization will provide the level of support that you need to know you're not alone, to heal in community. And I promise you, if you feel like you are the only one in the world that has gone through this, you are not, my friend.
So true. And people don't have to share their stories to belong.
Amen.
We belong because we matter. And for anybody listening, even if you're not an abortion survivor, I want you to know that you matter. I think that's part of what's missing in our culture today is so many people are led to believe that they don't matter. And then we see the impact of that with the people you serve, and then, of course, the survivors and the families that we serve. And we know that perpetuates the cycle of abortion in and of itself as well. Lots of people who believe that certain people don't matter or under certain circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you for reminding us that everyone matters and for what you do to help people experience that in every sphere of their life. I am grateful for you, my friend.
I'm grateful for you as well, Melissa. Thank you so much. And if anybody wants to find me personally, they can find me at DenishaWorkizer.com. And let's keep carrying that banner, my friend. You're doing incredible work. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. Denisha's last name, by the way, is spelled Workizer. I've changed it at my phone a couple of times over the years, if I'm being honest. So learn from me. But for you, the listening audience, I really hope that you enjoyed Denisha and my conversation today about not just abortion survival, but what it's like to struggle with identity, what it's like to continue to face life that is sometimes messy, and how to find community and support that continues to improve your quality of life and maybe, just maybe, helps you find and use your voice. Thank you for listening in and watching this episode of Life Beyond Abortion.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at melissaohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.